Work and well-being are intrinsically linked. From the effect that it has on our mental health to the relationship with our finances and the social connections that became so essential during the COVID crisis, work impacts all aspects of our well-being. This is the third in our series of 3 videos together with Aviva, where we have explored the findings from Aviva's Age of Ambiguity report series and how those findings can help employers define future well-being strategy. I'm joined today by Sophie Money, Group Protection Wellbeing Manager at Aviva, to explore how the different pillars of wellbeing are interlinked. So, Sophie, the report talks about the wellbeing circle. Can you explain the wellbeing circle for me and also why it's relevant to wellbeing at work?
Yeah, of course. So the wellbeing circle is essentially allows us to reframe what is commonly seen as the 3 pillars of wellbeing. So we really frequently hear mental, physical, and financial as being the pillars of wellbeing. And this research actually allowed us to see that there's a link between all of those. And how you are doing in one element of those really impacts on the others. So, whilst we have looked at them as pillars previously, they're not distinct and they are all very much interlinked. For example, our report specifically looked at financial well-being, and the report found some quite nice evidence that physical health actually plays a key role in determining a range of personal financial health outcomes. So really, the circle is just how all of those are encompassed, how they influence each other.
That's great, thank you. I'm assuming the sort of businesses must have different shaped circles. For example, they might have a good physical wellbeing offering, but little in place for financial wellbeing, for example. So how can employers start to build and evaluate their own wellbeing circle and fill in those gaps?
Yeah, definitely. I think firstly, I would just stop and really evaluate what the company already has. So I quite often see like group protection overlooked as a financial wellbeing offering. Actually, that's essentially what it is. The bottom line insurance, that's what we're there to do. So first off, I would say that the company should have a thorough look at what they have on offer. They should look at how what they already have is doing. So, are those elements being used by staff? How well are they deemed to be doing? Do they need to be improved? But then I'd also look at what areas do employees deem that there might be gaps in? So employee feedback is really important. We should really be getting their input on what they feel they're lacking in and where they could need some additional support.
Yeah, and I'm interested that you've sort of mentioned employees there, because I guess one of the challenges is that employees have all got a unique set of needs, and those will all depend on their own personal circumstances, their personality types, and how they want to access the benefits that they've got. So, what role does the wellbeing circle have in helping them?
So I think the wellbeing circle really brings it to life that it's not just well-being. It's not just like a pick and choose. You can't just do one thing and it works for everybody. I think the wellbeing circle allows employees to recognise that they have a responsibility in managing their overall well-being. So it shows that if they work harder at their physical well-being, their financial well-being will be positively impacted. It's about recognizing that it's a two-way street between the employee and the employer. So the employer can't just solve everything. It's very much for the employee to pick up what they have and for them to run with it in a way that suits them. But that being said, I do think employers need to consider whether they are offering their options, or however they provide them, in different formats. So some employees will do really well with engaging with their colleagues in activities outside of work. So they might like team build events. Other people might really not want to do that. So I think there needs to be a way of engaging everybody in different manners. And that might be through technology. So you might have apps that go down really well with some people, but others might want to choose to access information online. Others might want leaflets in the workplace. There needs to be a real range of accessibility options on offer for everybody. And as far as the employer can do to provide options, it might be that employees don't want to engage on that in that through their employer. They might want to do that elsewhere, and that's absolutely fine. It's just about providing the options and about being there.
We've talked quite a bit about physical, mental, and financial well-being and how they fit together. But I think the last 2 years have also shown us how important social well-being is as well. How does that fit into the wider picture of employee well-being?
First off, to define social well-being, I'd consider that to be the sharing and developing and sustaining meaningful relationships with others. So, of course, that feeds into all different elements of our lives. It can be your family, your friends, but importantly, is your colleagues. And that's how it would feed into the employee well-being. Of course, that's been impacted as we've all worked in a really different way over the last couple of years, whether you've had to continue going into your workplace or whether you've been removed completely and more isolated working from home. The way that we engage with others is really important to our overall well-being. So any new barriers that have been put in place, whether they are physical or having the barriers between all different elements of our lives completely removed, it's just been a completely different way of managing our everyday lives. So it's been really important that employers consider, are they engaging with their staff in the right way? Are they allowing for employees to still engage with each other in the same way? So it might not be face-to-face conversations that they are having, but are they still putting in place little coffee breaks? So all of those little catch-ups that you would have had in the workplace, have they been replaced? Are we still building those relationships that we would with others? I think it's really important, particularly when you have newer staff within a workplace. It's quite hard for them to build new relationships with people if they won't just naturally bump into them. So we're really all having to approach it in a different way, but consciously make the effort when previously it just happened quite naturally.
Sure. And I guess, the same is true of all of the pillars of well-being, I think, but sort of what works for one person in terms of social well-being doesn't necessarily work for another. How can you then sort of tailor that to the individual needs?
I think listening, and certainly, so that's an example when some people would be really, really keen to join a team build face to face, others wouldn't. It's really important to consider that we all have very different personalities, different learning styles. We will engage with certain themes better than others. And if you just apply one rule fits all, you can absolutely alienate a part of your employee population. And you absolutely wouldn't want to do that because your customers are going to be reflective of your employee base. So the way that you engage them, it would also then naturally filters out to customers. I think it's very important that you need to speak to employees, find out what their opinions are. Is the strategy that you already have successful in their eyes? And I'd also be really transparent about what you are doing. So it might feel to some that there's not much that meets their needs and they don't really feel like you're making consistent changes and constantly evolving. So I think it's really beneficial if you're very transparent of this is where we've started and these are the adjustments we've made. These are the reasons why we haven't provided this that a few colleagues might have preferred. Just being really open, really transparent, open to feedback. And that might be harder to achieve for a larger organization. So if you have many different channels of employees in different areas, you might need to be using line managers as real key support people in that instance. So you might need to ensure that your line managers are speaking to the staff about what's available and gaining their feedback of what they feel is helping, what's not working. It's just making sure that you've got a really good coverage of all staff.
Sure. And I was quite interested to talk to you about social prescribing, because this is something that we see starting to emerge more from GPs as well. Do you think
Mm.
that has a role as part of social well-being, and how could employers get involved with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, so looking at again a definition of social prescribing, so that would be so connecting employees to local non-clinical services. So it's more focusing on their well-being rather than illness and treatment. Um, so it very much bridges that prevention and treatment, all about ease of access. So looking at a wealth of information, what's available to that individual that suits their needs at that time. Um, I think employers really can have a hand in that. A simple place to start is by them holding a list of local services. So those services could be charity or they could be government led. Um, the purpose of it being that when somebody is in need to be signposted, so to have that social prescription, the research behind what services are available has already been done. So when they're in need, they don't need to go looking for it themselves. It's been found. It's the employer is informed, and they're able to advise in the time of need of the best options for the individual. They'd need to maintain that, of course. So it would be a little bit of work just in the background to make sure that that is reliable. So it's a good source of information. It might be that they have an individual in a workplace that's responsible for ensuring that those services are up to date and refreshing them when perhaps a new charity comes on board or a new initiative is brought out. And then they can be a touch point, just source of information for anybody who might need it.
That's great. Thanks, Sophie. And I guess we've covered quite a lot of ground here around sort of well-being circles and also the evolving side of social well-being. How are you seeing some of these things put into practice with employers at the moment?
Mm. Um, so I think there's been quite a change in employee well-being over the past couple of years. Absolutely seeing more companies bring in a specific role within a company to make sure that they are considering employee well-being. Seeing that more and more, lots of different roles advertised for those different positions. I think that's a really effective way. So having one person or a team responsible overall, so they can report on progress, they can map and track developments, they can identify what's working, what's not working. Um, Mental health first aiders were absolutely, a few years ago, it was seeing more and more of our customers ask about that and how to implement those into a workplace. Do see that still continuing, but I do think that many employers have laid a foundation of mental health training in the workplace. That seems like a less taboo topic at work. So we're seeing more customers looking to take that one step further, maybe look at further line manager training, which is really good. And what they can do now that those kind of foundations, those initial conversations, recognizing that it's important to do, it's time to start looking at what they have been doing so far and how it's been working. So pulling out any of the trends that they're finding, looking at the data, looking at what that is telling us, going back to how we talked about whether there are any gaps. So identify if there are services that you're using, are they being used to their maximum potential, but are there any things that you need to improve? But I suppose that being said, we can't assume that everybody has already started that journey. Of course, it's not as easy for, say, an SME to put one person solely in charge of employee well-being. So you might see that you have somebody in HR who's got well-being on as like an add-on to their role, which can be quite difficult, particularly if there's a limited budget in place to provide well-being services. But I don't necessarily think budget is a barrier to providing employee wellbeing, particularly when we talk about social prescribing, and being able to just provide information about what's out there, it's ease of access, ensuring that all employees are receiving those positive messages of support when they need them.
Sure. And how do you see some of those trends, that activity that you're seeing at the moment, evolving in the future?
I hope that we will see more concrete data, so more evidence of what works and what doesn't work. I think the data around wellbeing, particularly if you're seeing wellbeing as a prevention tool, it's really hard to prove that it works. So you can do it through employee surveys, so their feedback, how they are feeling, whether they are engaged in the workplace. I think that's a really good tell of if the initiatives that employers are putting in place are working. We are seeing, as mentioned, a lot of these wellbeing roles being put in place, which is really positive. But when you look a little bit closer, a lot of them do appear to be quite temporary, implying that once a strategy is put into place, then no further development of that is needed. I would hope that we would see these wellbeing roles being a really important integrated part of a company's strategy. You wouldn't have the business strategy, but just put in place and then never revised. So you don't want to do that for employee wellbeing, particularly when we know that it can change and it can be so variable month from month. I think it's something that we need to continue to work and development on. So I think that we will see that. I think that they will be absolutely necessary roles. It might be that they fit within different areas of a business. So I quite often see that you'll see a wellbeing manager connected to health and safety in one company, or you may see them connected to employee engagement in another. I think we might see more a clearer fit to where those roles should be within a company. I think it's quite a difficult one. It is an individual one down to the company of where that fits best. But I hope it will just be more of an expected addition to a company's structure rather than a nice bonus.
So, Sophie, thank you very, very much for your time and insights today. And I've really enjoyed exploring the importance of a joined up approach to wellbeing with you. So Aviva's report, Evolving in the Age of Ambiguity, which explores some of the themes we've discussed here in more detail, can be downloaded from the URL on the screen.